He did. Good evening. We will call to order the special public hearing of Tuesday, June 3rd, 2014 of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. At this point, I'd like to invite Stan Bowling, the Community Development Director, to lead us in the invocation, and that will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by the County Attorney, Dylan Reingold. Would everyone please rise?
Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for the part of the day that's done. We thank you for giving that to us. We ask for your blessing upon the business this evening and the rest of the activities this evening and tonight and into the rest of the week. We ask not only for your presence and your guidance, but also for our responsiveness to you and every prompt that you give us. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Please remain standing against the flag to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. We will go ahead and proceed with the public hearing. Just so you all know, we'll have a presentation by staff. The commissioners will have possibly have questions for staff, and then we will open it up to the public, and anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this will certainly be afforded the chance to do so at that time. So with that, this is a final hearing, and it's a consideration of the county-initiated land development regulation, an amendment to create section 911.29 of special overlay regulations for the West Gifford Industrial and Commerce area on 163 acres of property in West Gifford that is zoned IG, which is general industrial. This is a memorandum dated May 22nd, 2014. It's legislative in nature, and with that, I'll turn this over to Community Development Director Stan Bowling. Stan, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of items. I know you all are familiar with these regulations. This is actually the third time you all have seen the regulations. But I do want to just briefly give a little bit of context for the full audience. The proposed overlay regulations would take effect on IG, or general industrially zoned property, that's located west of 43rd Avenue. That's on this aerial map here on the right-hand side of the screen, between there and 58th Avenue over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And this 163 acres is located north of 41st Street and south of 47th Street. It's in the kind of purple and black dotted area. There are a number of existing uses in that area, and a fair amount of vacant property as well. And these overlay regulations would continue to retain the IG zoning, but change some uses that are allowed and provide some special regulations only within this 163 acre area. And what the overlay regulations would do is add 39 uses, eliminate 15 uses compared to the IG zoning, but retain most of the IG uses. There would also be special regulations for mulch facilities as administrative permit uses, and then as special exception uses, concrete batch plants and demolition debris facilities, not only as special exception uses, but with a host of new stringent criteria for any application that might come in for either of those two uses. The proposed regulations also require landscaping or an aesthetic wall between existing junkyards and 45th Street. A few of the junkyard owners, or one, has actually put up such a wall. There is one application in currently for another wall, but this would affect basically 6 of the property owners. At the May 13th hearing number 1 before you all, really there was only one change that you all directed staff to make to the ordinance itself, and that was to add the language similar structure to wall, and so we've done that in the appropriate places where the aesthetic wall option is in the code. You all also, on May 13th, announced your intention to adopt the regulations, and you also supported a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, which was to have some time-limited incentives for a junkyard owner to choose the aesthetic walls option over landscaping option. The aesthetic walls option, more permanent, less maintenance, but more costly than landscaping. And so there were 3 incentives that the P&Z asked you all to consider. One of them involved paying for application and permitting fees, another expediting applications, and the other was possibly looking at financing incentives. Staff has made minor revisions to the proposed ordinance as you all directed in May, and 2 of the incentives are ready to implement. The 3rd incentive, a financial incentive, the staff's still working on that, and we would present that to you all at a later date. But again, it doesn't affect the code, it doesn't affect the ordinance itself. Staff's recommendation is that the board adopt the overlay regulations with the minor change that was made that I already referred to. That you also authorize staff to pay for refunds, for site plan and permit fees for junkyard aesthetic walls that have already been applied for. To authorize staff through the end of this year, December 31st of this year, to pay application and permit fees. Again, it amounts to $275 in site plan and building permit fees for such walls. The funding would come from the general fund. And also to authorize staff to prioritize wall applications and permits over other applications and permit submittals through the end of this year, December 31, 2014. And again, staff would come back to you in a few weeks on a more detailed financial incentive. We would like a little more time to work with applicants, potential applicants or owners, to make sure we structure something that makes sense both for potential applicants and for the county. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you all might have, and just again remind the chairman this is a public hearing.
Thank you. Questions of staff?
I have one.
Commissioner Zork.
On the current, and this was not asked of me by the property owner, it's just a question that I have kind of from my own observation. On the existing mulch facility that is there, it's my understanding that that owner, operator of that site, has their piles below the maximum storage height that's allowed, just as that's how he chooses to run his business, I believe. It would not be considered additional or new impact if he chooses to operate all his mulch storage piles at the current capacity height, or would that trigger something?
No, as long as he continues to comply with the fire prevention guidelines, which include the height recommendations, as long as he's still operating under what they require, that would not trigger, that's not considered an expansion, for instance, of his existing facility. So these regulations would only apply to an expansion, and that would not be an expansion.
So just using the site to its current capacity, height, and footprint of because those piles have a certain size and a certain height, according to the fire marshals or the fire department.
That's correct. He continued to operate under his existing footprint, his existing approval. That's not considered an expansion.
Okay, great, thank you.
Of course, Mr. Chairman, if he did expand, it would be only on towards the site that the parcel that he's not using right now, where the expansion would occur.
That's correct. The expansion area would be what would be under review. His current operation would not be under review. Correct.
Commissioner Slaughter, any questions of staff at this time?
Fine, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Fletcher?
I'm fine, sir.
And Commissioner Davis, you good? The only thing I would like to bring up is at the last public hearing on this, Ms. Kathleen Jaskolski had voiced some concerns about air quality data and a potential air quality study. I did send that letter to the health department, and I believe we did forward the response to everyone. That doesn't fall under their jurisdiction, but they did give me the contact information for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, which does have jurisdiction on those air quality studies. We have sent subsequently a letter to DEP, but have not heard back yet from that. But we are following through on that. I just want to let you know that we have not forgotten that. We're pursuing that as you requested. Okay, so no comments from the commission. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this? Please come forward to either podium, state your name and address for the record. Good evening.
Yep.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Joe Adelaide, 4570 57th Avenue, Vero Beach, Florida, 32967. This has been a long process, and Progressive Civic League, the commissioners, staff, we've been on this journey for a long time, and we thank you for all the patience and all the efforts that were put forth in this project. We hope that you go with staff recommendations, and ultimately we will work hard with everybody within this area to make this project a good, ultimately a good project and a good success story in the end. But we hope that you will follow staff's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners and Stan. My name is Kathleen Yuskolsky. I live at 5211 Eleuthera Circle in Vero Beach, 32967. And I am coming again to say that I have ongoing concerns about the health and safety for the residents by retaining the IG zoning in a parcel of land that is surrounded by a residential community. I think we saw on the map, when you look at it, that it is completely surrounded by a residential community. And I think it's kind of unprecedented that we should have an IG zoned area that is in such close proximity to people who actually have their homes and their schools and their churches in such proximity to an IG rated zone. I know this is the final hearing, but I still do have a couple of questions I'd like to pose to the commissioners, and perhaps you don't know, maybe Stan knows. But by approving this change, does this essentially tie the commission's hands? In other words, let's say, for example, there was another A1 Wally that came in and wanted to set up a demolition debris, breaking up construction drywall, maybe the Chinese flawed drywall with all of the particulates that go into that, and they wanted to come in and set up their plant in this zone. Because that's included as a permitted use, albeit with an overlay of some regulations or best practices that would regulate this, does this essentially tie your hands? Are you unable at that point to do what Commissioner Fletcher did recently when he said we should not approve the A1 Wally because it represents a concern to the health and safety of the residents of the community? Are you essentially bound to be able to approve that because this is a permitted use in this parcel of land? And is it at that point would you have to say we don't have a recourse because this is a permitted use, they're in compliance with our best practices, and we can't say no? Is that where we are? I mean, are we?
Do you want to?
Sure, I'll be glad to make a comment. In terms of A1 Wally, you know, they had two sites. The first site was turned down for compatibility and other reasons. That application was subject to the special exception process, which is the same process that's proposed with these regulations. In addition to the hurdles that A1 Wally had to get over and were not successful in doing so at the first site, I think there are actually stronger criteria with this proposal. I think it's actually a higher hurdle, a higher bar for any applicant in this situation than the A1 Wally situation, just to summarize it.
But let's say that they met the best practices, they met that hurdle. Are we essentially in a situation where the commission's hands are now tied because it's been an explicitly stated permitted use, and that having met whatever the best practices are at that time, the commission then is unable to say, we have now a concern for the health and safety of the residents? Are we now, because of this motion, tying our hands and tying the commission's hands in terms of being able to act in the interests of the health and safety of the residents?
No, I mean, that's not the way I would characterize it.
How would you
Because, well, the way that I did, in terms of looking at the A1 Wally situation, I think it's a more stringent process that will be applied to any applicant. under these regulations than under the special exception regulations that A1 Wally went through.
So having met the stringent applications,
There's a difference between permitted use.
Oh, your
Right.
mic's not on,
And-
Bob.
Right.
Your mic's not.
Right, a difference between the permitted use, which is the language you're using, and a special exception. Most of the uses in this are permitted, but the two uses, if I remember correctly, including the one you're describing, is a special exception. So it throws it into a much more stringent category, and it does allow commissioners an opportunity to look at it a little more, under more of a microscope, to see exactly not just what it's going to be doing, but how it does impact the neighborhood. And that was the case with A1 Wally.
so you would be able to say, we're not going to approve this because we think it represents danger to the health and safety of the residents. You would be able,
Yeah.
even if you pass this agreement, you would still be able to say that.
There's a set of things that we could find, and if we can find them, then we can deny the application.
You would find them after they were in operation or before
No,
they were in
before,
operation?
before.
Before they were in operation. So there would be an opportunity for you to exercise. I don't want you to give away your ability to protect our safety and health by this, with the idea that there's some kind of best practice that's going to protect things when, and then have somebody come back and say, oh, well, you guys gave it away, you agreed to this, and so it's a permitted use, and they're in compliance, so there's nothing you can do about it, and then we're all kind of down the river with that. So, Attorney Reingold, you're shaking your head no, you're saying no, that's not the case?
As explained by Commissioner Sari about Mr. Bowling, yeah, essentially they would be subject to the special exception criteria just as A1 Wally was. We haven't handed them any more additional rights.
Okay.
And Stan, would that be a public hearing?
Oh, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
So it's publicly noticed. Everybody in the area will be notified that there is a public hearing. Everybody will have a chance to speak before the public hearing, and that was what happened at A1 Wally. I mean,
Okay.
and that is why we ended up when realizing that there were special properties about A1 Wally that increased the concerns. That I think is why we denied the application.
Okay, very good.
And just to follow up too, there's a burden of the applicant having to prove compatibility with the surrounding uses, and I think that's really where, A1 Wally failed, because if you looked at the permitted uses down there where that site was, and it could have been an organic farm, or it could have been a residence, or, a 5-acre residence, and then, dairy farm or something. The board clearly looked at the operation and said, no, that's not a use that's compatible with the other existing uses around there. So there is a fairly high bar on the applicants to show that they meet that compatibility. And also, we have to make that decision kind of as a judge and jury almost, and just look at the evidence and make sure that they have presented that case. So there is quite a bit of protection, I would say, under the special exemption process.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis?
And if you just think about it, the first place that they tried to locate or wanted to locate was in an agricultural area, but it just didn't quite make sense. The other area they tried to locate was an agriculture area, but it was next to the landfill, and it made sense. And so it gives us the discretion at that point to be able to say, where does this fit? We know there's a need. That's why it's allowed. That's why it's not banned countywide. In fact, we had hearings today, or not a hearing, I guess it was probably about a good half hour to 45-minute conversation about we have to meet like 75% of our total landfill by weight that comes in to our landfill. We've got to recycle. Well, if you do it by weight, obviously the easy low-hanging fruit is going to be concrete. Whenever you can take and grind that up and turn it back into aggregate, send it right back out, and it gets reused. That makes sense for landfill. It makes sense for communities, and it's as green as you can be as far as that goes. But but that gave us maximum discretion in being able to do that for something that we need in this community to be able to meet the requirements that are in front of us.
Right. And I guess my only issue with that is that the location, of that in terms of it being,
And that was my issue.
in the residential, right.
That was my issue
Right.
with the last time, with the first one that they came to us with. It didn't fit. It was, although it wasn't the zoning. It had nothing to do with the zoning. But in the zoning, it was permitted, but it was a special exception in the zoning.
Okay.
But the first one, the location didn't fit. And that was unanimous decision. I think Commissioner Zork, you might not, yep, he was lucky. He didn't have to live through that one. But the next one after, but, it gives us the discretion to be able to, and things like that fit. But, you can't create an ordinance that fits every corner of the county. We're learning that with an issue with the old Cumberland Farms up in Mobasso coming up before us. I mean, there's going to be some things that just don't fit where, by gosh, you just got to use some common horse sense, and this allows us to do it.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we're all in agreement that our hands are not being tied by agreeing to this, and that down the road somebody might say, well, wait a minute, this was approved by the commission, the Board of Commissioners, and it's a permitted use, and it's being regulated by best practices, so there's no recourse. But you're saying that if something like concrete processing or a one-wally demolition debris kind of facility wanted to come in and locate in this area around our residences, there would be more hearings, we'd have a chance to explore in more detail what the health impacts might be to the residents at that time.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's super.
Just like the ag zoning.
Right.
There was an ag zoning and an ag zoning. The zoning didn't change, just one of them fit, one of them didn't.
Okay.
Mr. Slesky, you mentioned, only because you mentioned the action I took during the A1 Wally
Right.
case. And you remember the dangling rock? The rock that was dangling on the fiberglass that should not be ground? If there is one of those incidents presented, so long as I'm here, you're going to have the same response. We're not going to compromise the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Indian River County or any specific area of Indian River County, that the same rules will apply. And
Okay.
I think we'll be well supported by the attorney as well on that.
I'm glad you said that, because it does look a little disparate that, it's somehow being approved for my neighborhood, but it wasn't being approved for somebody else's neighborhood. I just have another series of questions, and that is, let's say that a concrete processing plant winds up being approved. Commissioner Zork talked about all of the 21st century technology that Cemex used when they built their plant on 53rd and Dixie Highway. So let's say that a plant comes in and they meet all the standards that we've got in place at that time. I think as I read the best practices, it only calls for an air quality test at one interval, and that's 2 years later. And I was just wondering, what would be the recourse of the citizens of the county if a cement processing plant comes into our neighborhood and the air quality doesn't have to be tested for 2 years after they apparently pass this? Am I misunderstanding this, Stan? They pass the threshold, you all approve it, and then the next time we look at it is 2 years later when we're requiring the business owner to do some kind of air quality test.
Yeah, I think in terms of the criteria that are in this code, if someone were to get through the special exception process, which is a discretionary process, and it were approved, one of the minimum conditions would be, first of all, to do baseline monitoring, which is not required right now by DEP, and then to do quarterly monitoring for at least 2 years. Now, the monitoring program and the monitoring conditions, that's a minimum in the best management practices. If a project were to be approved, conditions above and beyond that could be warranted and could be attached.
Oh,
Okay.
Stan, I can add a little bit to that.
Sure.
I think on the, and I'm not proposing a concrete plant for anywhere, it's just my general background in the industry. The newer plants are designed to meet EPA national standards. So if CEMEX is building a plant in Seattle or New Jersey or Florida, their particulate discharge and control of materials and that. So when they design, the companies that make the machinery that do those things, they're looking at making sure they make a widget that works EPA compliant in other areas. So there's a whole nother layer of regulation that's not part of our hands, that's part of the process of manufacturing materials like that. So there is some additional in Florida, it's more done under DEP, but I know on the equipment, when it's, the manufacturers say, hey, we want to make this, we don't want to make it so it only works in one marketplace. They make it so it's EPA compliant pretty much for the whole country, maybe with the exception of some of the things that California has that are, and some may say off the charts, but so there are other safety measures that are in there. We control the site plan, we can control some of the minimum things, but there's a lot of other things that are regulated as part of their industry and the process how they make their product. I was going to ask one question that kind of ties into that. On the A1 Wally types, are they DEP regulated in any fact? So
Yes.
they have the same dust control.
Yes.
Now recycling is not as controlled as manufacturing, say, of cement. That can be a more controlled process if you're recycling, because I've spent some time at parked at 53rd Street in the railroad tracks watching the Rinker plant at what I'd say was full production. In other words, trucks coming and going every few minutes. More dust comes from the parking lot traffic, and I was looking at how can we approach them on trying to keep the parking, the dust that's on the ground kicks up more than the whole process of making the stuff they're putting in the trucks.
Right.
Is if the C&D people have a DEP requirement, that's again something over and above what we ask for.
Right. In fact, I think DEP still does what they've been doing for a number of years. Each project, individual project, has to write up their own set for their specific project,
Okay.
their specific operations, their own BMPs, and then have DEP review it. And actually, they actually kind of wind up with writing a manual for each project.
Okay.
Okay, so then as I understand it, what we would be looking for would be quarterly air quality reports, not just after. I must have misread that. I thought I read in the best practices that we were looking at 2 years, but what you're saying is that it actually involves quarterly.
Correct.
So every 3 months, then we would be looking at the air quality.
Right, that's how we'd be monitoring it for a period of at least 2 years after operation.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I do want to thank you, Commissioner O'Brien, for writing the letter to the Department of Health. I haven't seen the follow-up steering the issue to the EPA, but I did see the original letter. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank Commissioner Zork for clarifying the point I may have inartfully tried to express, and that is that it's the cumulative pollutants that I'm concerned about, not just one particular plant, but when you throw in tarmac and the asphalt processing and the millworks, and you throw everything in together, that it's the cumulative, and I thought you did a great job in characterizing that and helping me with that, so I appreciate that as well. So, and I thank all of you for your time, and hopefully we can continue to work together to keep the quality of air and healthy, safe standard for all the residents. Thank you.
Commissioner Sawyer, did you still?
No, I would pretty much cover it.
You're covered, okay. Thank you very much for your comments. We appreciate it.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Please. Good evening, welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Godfrey Gibson. I live at 4136 57th Court. I appreciate the effort and the time that you all have put into this working with the Civic League. But I've been through this one time before, and just a reminder that the county was going to put the sewer system over there on 58th and 43rd Street. We had to go through the long process of getting attorneys to fight that situation. We finally got the county to see that. But my point is, now that area where the commissioners was going to put their sewer system was going to mess up a whole neighborhood. But now that area is a viable tax-paying area in Hidden Lakes off of 58th. And it's very valuable to the county to increase the tax roll. My point is, if we keep having to come back and fight a fight every time someone come in, we want our area just like any other area. If they don't want it, it shouldn't be put in our area. I've been here long enough, longer than most of you. houses was condemned in Vero Beach, you moved them to Gifford. We didn't want that. No one would stop it. I'm glad you all have put some teeth into this, but we just want to make sure you all are commissioners now. There may be some new ones coming along that we don't want to have to go through this fight again. That's my point. And if you keep the area where these type of industrial projects cannot come in, I'm almost certain you're going to get some nice buildings and some nice homes built just like Hidden Lakes is over there now, that is a viable, on the tax roll, paying a lot of taxes. So when we consider these projects, that's the fight that I'm tired of, and I've been here since all my life, and I came back to stay in 1965. And I've seen a lot of changes, but I've seen a lot of fights. This one is 2 years old. The other one we had there was over a year, and we're paying lawyers and other fees. That I'm just hoping this will strengthen our community, that it can become a viable places where homes can be put on the tax roll and be an asset to the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Althea McKenzie, 2405 16th Avenue. I will echo probably the same sentiments from the last meeting. I believe that this decision is a poor decision and does not protect and serve the residents of this area. That currently also omitted from your presentation was the special exception list also includes utilities, public utilities, and is listed as heavy. On the last discussion that was here, that was had in the last public hearing, I asked Mr. Bowling, when the FPL substation went in and the high power lines were put in, were the residents within that area notified? And the answer was no. And then the tower that was put in, were the residents notified? The answer was no, because at that time we didn't have the communication. The special exception rule that you have is very interesting because it's almost an oxymoron to even go through this process. I take it that we're still going to have heavy industrial here, correct? It is not changing from industrial heavy.
That's cool. General,
okay.
General
But which is the heaviest, yes.
Okay. So the zoning stays the same, even though originally the request that came in front of the board back in 2009 or before was that the zoning that was currently zoned for this particular area was outdated, that it needed to be more compatible to what the surrounding areas were. Based on the discussions that have been had, more of this discussion as far as the zoning has been in favor of the property owners and business owners there, concluding with the last meeting where we were now going to help them put up fences high enough to hide the contamination. There's a concern regarding the special exception rule, because if you continue to put public utilities in there, you are not putting any distance between the residents' homes, the people that work there, and the children that attend schools there. This is including the communications tower that is currently there, where the recommended is 3 kilometers. Nowhere in your special exception rules, as I'm reading your special exception rules, which I'd like to read to you again, and that's why this makes this such an oxymoron. Is there any type of requirement for environmental hazard reviews? There's nothing outside of, well, whatever FCC says is okay.
I could probably help you with that, Althea. I've been here before on those, and we have no authority whatsoever on the environmental effects of a tower. And I'm not one to ever, I'm not trying to cower down on all that kind of stuff. I've just been there, wasted the taxpayers' dollars to talk to them about it, and at the end of the day, they politely say, thank you very much, have a nice day, now go pound sand.
However, you do have control on whether the tower does go in on a particular property. You are the approval for that, correct?
No. And as much as I would have, and believe you me, the last time we had one of these come before us, I mean, I know for a 5 o'clock meeting, this seems like a large crowd. It was the
It was packed.
St. John's Parish out of 74th. I don't know how many commissioners were here. 26th Street.
Standing room only.
Standing room only. And it was one of those things where we said no. And then the only commissioner voted yes because he knew where ultimately wind up was Commissioner Wheeler. And he wound up being right. And the rest of us, it felt good, but it didn't do any good at the end of the day. And the reason for that is because, and I don't know whether the public utilities is I know you're focusing in on the tower because there's one of those there, but our ability on that is futile. It really is, because the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, they handle all of that. And they dictate where those go, and it's based on need, and then they have their own science, and it's like everybody wanting the federal government to take care of some issue up there in Chesapeake Bay, and everybody being opposed to that, when quite frankly that scares me to death. I'd rather handle it here locally.
Okay. I'm reading your Land Development Review Amendments Regulations, Section 971. And it says the Board of County Commissions review the decisions of placement of utilities, and this is Section 7C, with reference to location, availability, and compatibility. That's here. This is your
Finish the sentence. Is that it? Is there a period?
And there's a list of different requirements that you have to go through, including off-street parking and loading areas where required, with particular attention to the items above, the economic noise, glare, odor effects of the special exception on adjoining properties and properties generally in the district. Where I'm leading with this is that you also have currently in place a full entire section regarding the review of uses of a special exception. This is the county's documents.
And just so Stan, help me if and I'm not sure of the utility, but if this, I'm assuming we have this language in there because we used to have a sewer treatment facility somewhere there in Gifford off of 49th Street on the north side. Is that why that's in there?
That's correct.
And Althea, that's no longer there. I mean, we've made the commitment to move that out, and that's now down there at the landfill right now. And so that sewer treatment facility, although there's still an area there, but it's no longer where the people that pump out their septic tanks, where those companies go and dump, and where you get that nice odoriferous odor across the area.
Different.
So are you saying, Commissioner, that you are no longer responsible for the placement of utilities in the area?
No, what I'm saying is there's still probably an area in there where we might need to put some utilities, not that type. And if it is that type, is it not a special exception? If it is a special exception, then that turns it back to the A1 Wallies that we're talking about. And I don't think, but maybe I'm wrong, whenever we spent, I bet you we spent almost $3 million, if my mind serves me correctly, to move the sludge treatment facility from the Gifford community up there off of 49th Street down to the landfill. Ma'am?
Was it placed in Wabasso instead?
No.
That's a different sewer.
It was the landfill.
I'm confused.
We moved it where we talked about moving the A1 Wally. All of that, and of course ours was a landfill, and we moved it on top of our facility. The other one was A1 zoning, where it was approved, but it was right next to, where we take care of sludge. And so that goes back to the discretion. And does that mean that the future commissions are ever going to make the right decision? No. In fact, I haven't ever made the right decision here. I thought I was wrong once. I thought that was funny.
Now, Commissioner Davis.
We work with you. And that was pretty good there, Commissioner.
I don't think we disagree about it. It's a number of times you've been wrong.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and finish my concerns.
And I'm sorry for interrupting, but I just...
And not at all, because of all the commissioners, you're probably the person that I work with closely, who I find has been open to helping us in several projects. And all's fair in love, war, and politics. So I will continue. The contamination that currently exists in that area is what it is, and those utilities are there. Well, last time we had a discussion, it was about whether to also increase the capacity to look at, or as a suggestion, to look at a natural gas line. Natural gas line was recently added on 45th Street along Gifford Middle School. Gifford Middle School themselves were not advised that the gas lines were being put in because the teachers were locked in for the afternoon because they could not get out of the property. The gas line that was put in was only buried 3 feet underground. When you bury a dead body, you bury it 6 feet underground. And the reason for that is the decaying body will release odors and the same gases that run through these gas lines. Now, I'm going to read the special exceptions as it is written in your policies, and then I'm going to conclude what my concerns are. My concerns are the pattern of behavior and consideration for this community is there. It exists. It is that we just don't care. You are going to live with this situation whether you like it or not, and we're going to legalize it, and then we're going to make it even more fortified through special exceptions. But what was interesting is in review of uses requiring special exception, it says the purpose and intent of special exception, section 1. This section is intended to identify the procedures and reference the specific criteria for considering the approval of special exceptions. The procedure established herein are intended to ensure that a careful examination and findings of fact will be made by the appropriate county entities during the review of the special exception uses. Such review shall consider the nature, extent, and potential external impacts associated with special exception uses. Special exception uses, and I'll read the next paragraph, are those types of uses that would not generally be appropriate throughout a particular zoning district. And I pause there because we're not changing the zoning here. We are keeping it exactly the same, but we're adding special exceptions just in case we need to fortify what we're doing. Now, the next paragraph in 2A says, however, when special exception uses are carefully controlled as to the number, area, and location and/or relationship to the vicinity, such uses would not adversely impact the public health, safety, comfort, good order, appearance, convenience, morals, and general welfare, and as such would be compatible within permitted uses within the particular zoning district. So this special exception thing, you're not doing us a favor. The fact is, this is still industrial heavy, that the industries that can be brought in with or without special exception and everybody holding hands and crying kumbaya, you are still bringing contaminants within a certain amount of distance. Within 1,500 students that go to school 185 days a year, whether they're from Gifford or not, that are being subjected to hazardous material that's being generated by this heavy industrial area. The heavy industrial component and the special exceptions, whether you put them together or not, do not match this residential area anymore. And it is my opinion that it is the county commissioner's responsibility to make sure that whether it's today, next week, 10 years from now, or 10 years ago, that the people are entitled to the basic human rights of living in a clean environment. My children go to Gifford Middle School, 620 children go to Dodgertown, 920 kids go to Gifford Middle. There are people that work in that area, and there are families that are now sleeping under the power lines, sleeping under the communication towers, and Gifford Middle has had the joy of having the communications added to the water tower right outside their play area. It says, the zoning Special exception uses, specifically the zoning districts which are established in this chapter 911, designate those uses and activities which shall be regulated as special exception uses. Those uses which are designated as special exception uses shall be permitted only after being approved pursuant to the procedures established in this section and further satisfy the specific use criteria in this chapter. And I will repeat again, such uses would not, and I would like to add, should not adversely impact the public health, safety, comfort, good order, appearance, convenience, morals, and general welfare. Putting up aesthetic walls to hide the debris is not the answer. Putting a Band-Aid over a sore, and I'm going to use something a little bit graphic. When I was little, the dogs would fight, and they would come into the yard, and that's what dogs do. And I would go out there, and I would get my dog, who wasn't allowed in the house because we just don't do that type of stuff where I'm from. I would clean out his little wound, and I would wrap it. And the next day, I would come back, and there would be little maggots in there, and I'd have to pick those out. And I'd wrap it again. Then I'd have to reopen it again. This is no different, what you're doing here, than putting a Band-Aid to cover up what is happening. Today, in our meeting with Vincent Burke, we talked about the Geocentech contract and work order for them to go and do the soil samples or whatever they need to do, because there's a water table under here. Everyone has admitted that this is permeable ground, and the future drinking water is located right under Gifford. So to me, everything just seems topsy-turvy. On one hand, we're environmentally sound, and on the other hand, let's screw the 1,500 kids and the residents that live there. Who cares if they die of cancer? Who cares if they have brain tumors? Who cares? I would like for the county commission to care. Please care. Show that you're genuinely concerned. But the bottom line is, you're going to vote. You're going to vote in the best interest, if it's anything like last week's, of the business owners. And you're going to put economics in front of human rights. And I will say again, it is immoral, unethical, and today I will say it's illegal, and it is criminal. And you should be ashamed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Good evening, Commissioners. Anthony Brown, 415957 Court, Vero Beach, Florida. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm very proud to be a part of something where you men admitted fault. By doing this overlay, you have all admitted that there's something wrong in Gifford. President Adelaide and all of us who've been doing this for over 6 years, we admitted that we were going to come before you with one cause. It's not perfect what you're doing. As an individual, it does not meet my needs, but for a community, you've made a step. You have said that we did something wrong in 1957. I was born in Indian River County in 1953. I'm not an outsider. I'm not a Johnny-come-lately. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I've been a part of this struggle all my life. No, I'm not going to stand and shout for you. You did your job. I'm honored that you said something's wrong in Gifford. Now it's incumbent upon all of us to make it work. As some other people have said, there's some fallacies in this. There's fallacies in anything we do. There's human error. All of us are subject to it. But by you saying that something was wrong in Gifford, as Commissioner Wheeler said, we should put it out by I-95, and I think Commissioner Solari agreed with him. And Mr. O'Brien, I'm honored that you were bold enough to say that you didn't care about Brett Harris, because a lot of people were concerned, well, we're going to get sued and we're going to do that. As the president, after this is done and you vote on it, and hopefully you'll go ahead and approve it, it allows me to go in as the president of the Indian River County branch of the NAACP and its Environmental Justice Committee to come back to you. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. You've admitted wrong. You've admitted that there's something out there. I'm now in a process, thanks to my president, Mr. Adler, thanks to you for admitting that there's something wrong. I'm in a position now to come at you to let you know that we have specific problems. I'm not going to generalize. We can sit here and badger back and forth all night long about this and that, environmental racism, this and that. You have taken a step forward. I commend you for that, but the fight is not over. Thank you for what you've done. We will meet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Anyone else? Good evening, welcome.
Hi, I'm Wanda Scott. I'm also a 4306 26th Avenue. I'm also a disabled veteran, business owner, community activism or whatever. Anyway, I fight for the community. I'm also been on this battle. Some would say I'm over 50 years old, but anyway. I've been here all my life, and with the exception of going away to the military, retired, almost 14 years retired. Now my health is going backwards. I'm now really wear the status of a disabled veteran. When a lot of the people were talking about the air quality, the different contaminants. I know when I worked in Washington State at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, I was exposed to asbestosis, and I became sick for 2 years with a disease called, golly, my mind just, that's another part of this sickness. Yeah. But anyway, and that was from inhaling contaminants. So diseases do come about, and it afflicted my life for 2 years, and then it released me. But Reggie White died of the same disease. A few other famous people died of, no, he didn't work at the shipyard, but he breathed in some type of inhalation that was toxic to the body. So this is real. Now I'm faced with the same situation. I already live in a community where there's a lot of, two plants, and then we're going to add a third one. So I'm more sensitive. I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm speaking for all. I stand for other people, like senior citizens who are more vulnerable to getting sick. Could I afford this? Might take me out. Some people saying, yeah. No, but on a serious note, that is something to consider. We do have an aging population. We have a lot of people who have come back or returned from the military that conditions may be frail. We have a lot of children that attends Gifford Middle, Dodgertown. So we have a population or community at risk. So I'm here standing in the gap on behalf of the people to reconsider. If it's about dollars, couldn't they move it somewhere else? Why they got to put it in Gifford? Because it's cheap land, or the people are in, below the federal poverty guidelines, 200% to 300%. I'm not talking about West Gifford. I'm talking about the people near the railroad track, Coon Bottom, in the middle of town. These are the people that are, below the federal poverty guidelines. Is this community being chosen because of that? Could they put it somewhere else that it does not contribute to the already contaminants that are in place right now? Please consider that. I know we have a group of commissioners that do want to do the right thing. And I'll stand behind you if you do the right thing. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? So, ma'am, come on up here, ma'am.
Oh, you can come up.
Yeah, come on, and then Keith, come on over here on this other podium, we'll be right to you. Yes, ma'am, welcome, your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Millicent Henry, and I live at 6018 Ridge Lake Circle. The zip code is 32967. This is my first time attending a meeting. This is my first time hearing everything in depth. I've heard the chatter about what's going on. I wanted to know, is it okay to put it back up where it's going to be located? Can you put that back up there?
That'd be the overall overlay stand. Sir, if you'd like to speak, you'll have your moment, but we have someone speaking now.
I was sitting there, and when he put that up, my heart dropped. My heart just dropped. Because when I look at that, I don't know how to read that properly, but when I looked at that and I saw all the houses around there, and you were specific, sir, when you said it is within the purple and dark lines that it's going to be placed, I sat there and I thought, what are they saying? Do they even know what they're saying? Do they understand what they just said? They're going to put that thing there around, and around it is homes, people, lives, children. People live there. There is no reason for that. It can be put somewhere else.
Ms. Henry, let me clarify for you a little bit.
Excuse me, but I really don't need any clarification. I just want to make my statements and go.
Yes, ma'am, you do. Because this just shows the area where there's already existing industrial zoning.
General zoning.
We are not adding a new section here. We are outlining the area that's under consideration where we have tried to remove some of the industrial uses in this area so that it's not as onerous as you're referring to.
It's not as?
Yes.
Yes.
So why does it even have to be?
Well, because our property owners there that do have certain rights for the land they've owned and paid taxes on for the last 60 years, and it's a balancing act with trying to work with the neighbors and the residents to try to remove some of the uses that might be the worst ones. At the same time, there are owners of that property that have vested rights to their property, and we have to balance that. So we've been working for 2 years on this, or longer, I guess, to try to find that balance. But just to be very clear, this is not a new zoning we're putting in here. We're just showing the boundary of existing zoning where we have tried to modify it to make it more palatable.
Okay. Just to add to what you just said, and then I'll continue with what I want to say.
Please, go ahead.
You have an industrial area that you've zoned out, and there are already problems there. It's already probably messing up the air. I don't know all those numbers, and you're just going to add to that. That's all I heard you say.
That's not the case.
I'm sorry, but...
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I could
So
say
I'll
it
just
again, but if that's
continue.
all you heard, I can't help you with it.
Right.
That's fine. I didn't ask for clarification in the first place. Thank you. All right. So someone said, and I don't remember who said it already in the meeting tonight, that you thought of the landfill and you decided not to go with the landfill. And I'm thinking, what life are you affecting out there by the landfill?
That's exactly the opposite of why we put it, but never mind.
Yes, thank you. So who are you affecting at the landfill? No one. There's no life being affected there. And then it seems like with it being where it is, it's affecting the people. And that is my biggest concern, is people. When you lose a life, that's it. It doesn't come back. Wanda just said it perfectly, that something affected her, and even though it released her, the asbestos, it released her, her body is compromised already. So with her breathing in these toxins or anything else going in the air, it's actually going to lessen her cells from being able to regenerate. it seems as if it's just a total disregard for life, for human life. I just lost 2 friends in the past week. Can't get them back. They were lost to cancer. You can't get them back. So think about the lives around where you're putting this. I'm also a veteran. I'm a disabled veteran. I've traveled the whole world. I chose to live in Vero Beach. I had never visited Vero Beach. I did my research, and I decided that I wanted to come here for this very reason. At the time I moved here 17 years ago, it was the best place to raise children. The best place to raise children. That's what I was looking for. I didn't come here to have problems breathing. For the past 3 years, my daughter has been able to breathe easy. But before that, she was on 5 years of immunotherapy trying to breathe. She missed days from school, weeks at a time, because she couldn't breathe. I don't know where you guys live. I don't know any of you. I don't even know these names I see up here. I've seen Mr. Flesher's name. I've heard of Mr. Davis. The rest of you, I don't know who you are. That's sad for me and you, that I don't know who you are and you're the ones making the decisions in town. But my daughter's breathing easy now, and I appreciate that so much. And I don't want her to have to struggle to breathe, like I just saw my friend Beth die the other day, gasping for breath. I don't want to see that for my own child. If the tower is out of your control, what sense does it make to add air quality that is already compromised to what's already there? The pollen count goes crazy in this county at certain times of the year. Mixing that with other things, oh my gosh, I can only imagine. Again, I'm going to echo what someone else says. It seems as if, no, let me change that. You don't care about the people. It's about money. It's about economics. I see it. I feel it. It's my gut that you don't care about people and the breath that they breathe. Living and breathing clean air, that is not the case here. You all are not considering what the air quality is. That is my only main concern, is the air quality. How much dust does it kick up when I just drive down a simple dirt road? I live beside a dirt road. Once in a while I go down it, and I look in my rear view. No matter how slow I go, it kicks up dust. For the neighbors on the side of that street, I feel for them. They probably have dust every day. But there are certain days that I don't go outside because of the air quality in my county. And if this is going to be also being spread everywhere in our county, you can't control it. Once it goes up in the air, what are you telling me? You're going to do a test every 3 months to see what it is? Then what are you telling me? Oh, it's bad, or it's not so bad. But at some point, it's not good. So I'm pleading with you guys for your morals and your ethics to look at what is being done here. It is not worth it. It could be your family members. Like I said, I'm ex-military. I was in the Navy. I moved here, and I love my little town. That's what I tell everybody. I love my little town. I love it. I'm minutes from the ocean. I can relax here. If I want to go to a big town where they have all these toxins going on, I've been living in LA. I can go to Miami and come back, and go to Jacksonville, come to Orlando and come back, but I come back home to my town. So I now have friends that want to move here because this is my little town. I have a family that's moving here next month with 6 kids, 6 children, because they want to experience what I'm experiencing in my little town. I have friends in England. I was raised in England. I have friends moving here because of my little town. It's too cold for them in England, but they want to come to my little town. I don't know what else I can say to you guys other than You really, really need to think about it. The lady over here that was speaking, she kept asking you the question over and over and over in so many different ways. And I'm sitting there screaming inside me, just answer her. Can you just answer her? All she wanted to know is, are our hands tied? Once we make this decision, this is the last hearing I heard. Once we finish this meeting, are our hands tied? And none of you would answer. You kept skipping and dancing around the answer.
No, we answered clearly her.
No, it was clear at the end. It was clear at the end, but not when she was asking. She had to go through hoops to get you guys to answer.
Okay.
And if you're here representing us, all we're asking for is answers, for you to have the same agenda as the community that you're here supporting. Not to have an agenda of your own trying to please businesses and whatever. Don't try to build the community off of somebody else's back when they're dying. They're already down. You don't do that. You just don't do that. If you go to church, you have morals. I know you do. Think about what you're doing. Think about who it's going to affect. You're here now and you're fine. You may be able to leave, but you have a family. You have kids that may want to stay here. You have grandchildren and great-grandchildren that are coming along. And we can make this community what it needs to be if we all work together. But when the commissioner, when the board is saying something like this, it makes me wonder, what is going to happen to us in the future? Do I want to stay here? I love my town. I really do. And I want to be able to breathe in it. You have to learn to care about people, not go with the big picture. They say that the road less traveled is sometimes the better road to take. Don't try to go with everybody else. Don't try to be like all those big cities and they're now falling apart. We're Vero Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. Keith, were you coming up?
I thought he wanted to talk.
Sorry, well. Good evening. Welcome. Your name and address, please.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Keith Tagg. I own Mr. Scrap Incorporated on 45th Street. Geez, I really don't know where to begin. A few years ago, I put up a fence in front of my place, and that's basically when this kind of started. And I don't know what this one lady's talking about, hiding the contaminants from a junkyard. I buy material, and I'll be darned if I'm gonna let it blow out in the street, because I'm gonna sell it so I can make money, and I have the community bringing me in material to sell it to pay their bills. The fence, I guess, I don't know if anybody, I don't think it's to hide contaminants. I think it's to beautify Gifford, and I think that's what that was about. I missed the last meeting, and evidently I must have missed something very important, because everybody today at this meeting is talking about the clean air. Did I miss anything, or is that just about these cement plants that's wanting to come in? That has not happened yet.
Yeah, no.
And the air quality right now, in my eyes, I've been there for 19 years, it's going on 20 years. I think the air quality is the same. We got dirt roads. I live on a dirt road. I had a choice to live on a paved road or a dirt road, but I choose where I wanted to live. And I'm all for this, I don't know who it is, the one lady that was just talking, man, you guys pave all the roads in Indian River County, and that would be perfect. There wouldn't be no more dust in the air. But there's still going to be dust from everywhere. And as far as my yards, I got Joe up here, I got Tony over here. I don't know why anybody else didn't come. But our yards throughout the past, we've cleaned those yards up. There's no contaminants. I just had the DEP coming into a thorough inspection on my yard, I'd say 2 weeks ago. They did like a 16-page report on how nice the place actually looked. This is the DEP, okay? And another thing, it's hard for me to figure it all out because I should have been writing it down. But anyway, then you got another man here from the NAACP stating you guys admitted you did something wrong. In my eyes, I don't think you guys did anything wrong. I think you guys are actually trying to look out for the people by putting overlays on the IG industrial area, which we're talking about. With all these overlays that you guys are putting in place, I find it almost impossible for any of the ones that's in there that you're going to leave there, like the cement factories and stuff like that, to ever be able to afford it, to ever even put one in there. Let's see what else was there. As far as IG, it's been there for a long time. And I hear people talking, When I came here to move into Vero Beach, I used to live in Fort Pierce. When I came to Vero Beach, I kind of knew what was going on in the area, and I don't live very far from my job. I choose to live there. I did the checking out. If I didn't like what the area was, I would have never moved there in the first place. All this IG was basically there before all these residential areas was put in there. I watched them being built. I got a lot of scrap metal from them, and I liked it. But now the economy is a little bit, I don't see anything else growing around there. But anyway, getting back to the pollutants at the junkyards, which I'm basically concerned about. I drain all the fluids out of all the vehicles. I get rid of the Freon, and recycle it and all that. I get paid for all that stuff. I'll be darned, like I said, I'm not going to let it go out. And I don't know where they're coming from about this wall. I just want to state a point. This wall of keeping contaminants in. I don't like that. And then I don't like the air quality. Sure, I really don't want to have a cement factory come in and raise all this dust and everything, that everybody says is so contaminant. But gal, they're everywhere in the United States. In order for the United States or anything in the world to build, you have to have these kind of buildings. And it's not killing everybody around where they're at. Like I said, I just don't know how to explain it. But if one comes in, if they go by all the overlays that you guys put in, man, you're going to be able to have a baby right there, because it's going to be the most sanitary place in the world because of the overlays. Anyway, I guess that's about it.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Commissioner Fletcher?
I'd just like to comment, Keith, I know that you've run an operation for many years, and I think that if the public knew how many actions you've had to take in order to mitigate and to address the needs and concerns of the EPA, and what you've had to do with cement linings, and thank you for the fence. You made a comment that was made earlier. I believe that none of us were here when that happened. I don't think that, but with the exception of one, was actually born in 1957. However, there has been a lot of ill that has developed and with planning, and I think that this plan has resolved many of those issues, the confrontations of the different zoning regulations and allowances. It's been a great privilege and honor to work with over 300 years of community involvement in a room where all of those years have been put together, and the needs have been separated from the wants and the concerns, and then they were put in the forefront. And I believe that this plan did best address a lot of the concerns of a community that's been here for decades, and that, again, when we were in that room, there was over 300 years of input that was taking place. And believe me, it was not that easy dealing with some of the issues. I want to thank you for what you've done at your business facility, and I don't think that you've concealed anything. You've addressed it and made the appearance in the community a better place. And I know that it was not always the case, and we have to admit that we can go back even 10 years, it was kind of rough looking. And
yeah, all of them.
You've done a great part, and we expect all of the businesses to do that and continue on and to make it better and not conceal what might be there because I don't think that we have many of the issues that you also heard. I don't believe that that is in existence today. That was a concern, and that's why we started this whole process 2 years ago.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Yes, ma'am, please come up. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be before you tonight. Marcy Nolan, 1 Broward Boulevard, Fort Lauderdale. I'm an attorney here today, proudly representing the Progressive Civic League of Gifford. We have a few of our members in the audience today. You've heard from Mr. Idolette, Freddie Wolford's here, Tony Brown, Dr. Hudson, Godfrey Gibson spoke, Mary McKenzie, Lavertus Hayes, Donna Hart, and Julian Price are all here. I've been fortunate enough to represent, as a land use attorney, the Progressive Civic League of Gifford for the last, I want to say, 2.5 years. I'm going to try to give a little bit of background for not the commissioners so much as for members of the audience. This all started as a zoning project, as a zoning and a land use project. What happened back in the 50s is that the zoning and the land use that you see on the map today was put in place. And you had residential uses adjacent to industrial uses. I would love to tell you that Gifford is the only place that this happens, but I work in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, St. Lucie County. There are places throughout the counties where you have industrial adjacent to residential. What you have to do is you look at your zoning code, look at your land use, and see ways to move forward and protect both the residents as well as the property owners. When I was first brought in, we started meeting with the property owners, not the residential property owners, but the commercial and industrial property owners. And there was some concern about changing the zoning, because that was really what our first goal was. Let's change the zoning, let's get rid of the uses we don't want, let's make this a kumbaya situation. Unfortunately, existing property owners, both residential as well as the industrial, have vested rights. They have property rights. And in Florida, we have something called the Burt J. Harris Act. So we couldn't easily go in there and get rid of all the uses that the residents in the Gifford area really wanted to get rid of. And the property owners, even though they would say to your face, we don't ever want to have those uses, or our intent is not to build those uses, they also didn't want to preclude themselves from being able to sell their property in the future. So what we were able to do with the work of your staff was come up with something called an overlay district. And for those who aren't familiar with the concept, we have our base zoning. That is the IG zoning district. We're not changing that. And that zoning district is not just in Gifford, it's throughout the county. So what we've done is created an overlay that sits on top of the zoning district and it addresses certain uses in different ways because of where they are located. And in order for that overlay district to work, it creates certain regulations specific for the Gifford area. And that's where the special exception process comes in, as well as the administrative permit process. When we were first working with the property owners, again, both the residential and the industrial, that was a relatively new concept. What do you mean administrative permit? What do you mean special exception? And again, all of the uses we're talking about out of that whole list of, I want to say 27, there were 3 that were of primary concern. It was the concrete batch plant, which you've heard a lot of. It was the mulch facility, and it was the demolition and debris. And I did live through A1 Wally with all of the commissioners here. So when we looked at the process that we could put in place that allowed the property owners the ability to still have that use if they wanted it under certain conditions, as well as give the public an opportunity to be heard, and more importantly, the commissioners and their staff the opportunity to review it against the health, safety, and welfare provision, the zoning code, the basis for your police powers, it was actually a win-win for everyone. We're not saying these uses are going to come in tomorrow, but these uses were there yesterday. They're actually still there here today. And in the future, moving forward, it gives the commissioners the power to look at the location of these uses. Is it in the right location? Does it address the issues of the community? And can it be approved? So from our perspective, we've come a long way. This is something that is going to make the community better as we move forward. We can't go back. We're just not allowed to go back. But by going forward, by putting in the incentives, I really want to thank, I want to say it was your Planning and Zoning Board that came up with the incentive of accelerating the wall and working with the permitting issue and expediting permitting. I think that is going to make a big difference. And when new property owners come in to build in Gifford area, industrial or residential, they're going to build a product that's going to be compatible with the new Gifford that they see. So we're here tonight in support of the zoning ordinance. We want to thank all of you for your work. We want to thank your staff for the work. And in conclusion, there's been a lot of conversation about the commission not caring about the Gifford community. You have another meeting coming up, June 12th, where you're looking at the Gifford Master Plan. Since I've been fortunate enough to become part of the Gifford community in a way, I've seen how much time and energy all your staff and all the commissioners have put in Gifford. Again, we can't go back, but there's a lot of planning efforts that have been moving forward into the Gifford community, and I think in the future you're going to see that. It takes a long time. Planning comes first, and then you see the results 5 years, 10 years down the road. But I want to thank you for all you've done for the community, and please keep up the work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nolan.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wishes to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. I'm Wanda Scott. The disease I was talking about is sarcoidosis. That is very real, and it can come to you and it can release you. And then there's quite a few people who have died of that. So that was the disease I couldn't think of, but I do want to express that in case someone does come down with this disease. It is from inhalation. I do want to clarify, and this is very important, I'm also a part of the member of the Gifford Economic Development Council, and it was brought up about is the need for economics or businesses, is that more important than the people? I am about economics. I am a business owner, and I don't support this. I don't support the overlay or any other exceptions, because as I know in business, I can get enough money from the bank and I can supersede any overlay that you can come up with and get into business or do what I need to do. Get money from New York or wherever, Miami or from whoever to take care of the overlays. That is not enough safeguard to protect our community. There's too many landowners that are elderly, who are frail in health, who could be very vulnerable to this project. And I'm standing again. The young lady from the attorney for the Progressive Civic League was hired, and that is an organization. Like, I'm an organization for the Gifford Economic Development Council, and I do want to express about authority. Where does my authority begin, and where does my authority end? Can I speak for the Gifford residents, or can I just speak for the people in the organization? Can I stand up and speak on behalf of Gifford Economic Development Council in behalf of the people? Where does my authority begins and where does my authority ends? Or can I just speak for the people, part of my organization, or unless I have something in writing on behalf of the people? That might be a question for you, Attorney Ringo. Where does my authority begins and where does my authority ends? As an organization, 501(c), this is very relevant because we are speaking when people are, well, certain organizations are speaking on behalf of the Gifford residents. I don't have that authority unless the people of Gifford give me that authority, either in writing or by voted. I can only speak for the organization who has given me authority. So when people are standing up here saying, I'm standing on behalf of the Gifford residents, and I'm a business owner, no one has talked to me. I'm a taxpayer, I'm a landowner. I've been in this in this community a long time. And as a matter of fact, our business is the oldest African business in the county, 53 years old, the oldest African business. I still don't have the authority to speak for Gifford. I can only speak for my land that I pay taxes on. Or if I'm part of the organization, I can only speak, and that is my authority of the organization. So when people are standing up saying, I'm speaking for the Gifford residents, we need to clarify that, because no one's checked with me and asked, how do you feel, or do you want to be part of? I don't want nobody making any decisions about my land, about my business, or what impacts me at all. So a lot of decisions this year and previously, or for the last 30 years, have been made by organizations that only have the authority within that organization unless we voted, like Commissioner Fletcher. He's over District 2. We voted Commissioner Fletcher in to speak for us. No other organization have I voted in. But I can speak for the Gifford Economics because I am representing them and only the people that are part of that, or proxy members. So I just want to clarify this. So no matter who has hired who, your authority is in a small window, and it needs to stay that way, because any decisions that are made outside of that, outside of my authority or my parameters, is what? What is that? You know the law. What is that? If I make decisions from the Gifford Economic for Gifford, and I don't have the parameter, the power base or the authority, and then if I got the authority, who did I get the authority from?
Ms. Scott.
Let's clarify that.
The board is ultra vires. Now, but I think the key point here is anyone can get up and say they represent somebody or not. I just highly recommend that whatever folks have, they come here today, they voice their opinions, they can state they represent somebody, they could state they don't represent somebody, they could say they just here on behalf of themselves. I think the most important thing, though, for the board here today is to hear the issues pertaining to the zoning ordinance as opposed to debating back and forth about whether someone has the authority or not.
Now, what I want to clarify, you missed the whole point. When I
Scott,
come up,
Ms.
excuse
Scott.
me, let me clarify. When I come up and I speak and I says I'm standing up for the Gifford residents, then you need to get at least 2/3 signatures, votes, or if somebody votes you in. I don't have that authority, and no other organization had that authority unless the people of Gifford has given it to them. 10 or 15 people does not give me the authority to speak for Gifford. I can speak for Mosley because I pay taxes. I pay property tax. I pay property tax for a few other buildings. I can speak for that. I'm within my right, within my law, within my authority. But I want anybody else coming up here and then decisions are made because they're saying they're speaking for the Gifford residents. And then the county comes back and say, oh, the Gifford residents was all in favor of this, so we're going, no, it needs to be just identify who you're representing. If you're representing 10 people, represent 10 people. But don't speak for Gifford as a whole. That's what I'm upset about, because that's what's happening here. And I don't want this to, I'm just stating this for the record, because I know a decision will be made very soon. You'll say the Gifford residents was in support of the overlay, and this is why we're making the decision. I'm paying attention to a pattern that I keep seeing when decisions are made here in the county commission. You know, I'm here almost every Tuesday, and I'm watching a pattern. If I go to a meeting and my name's signed on the list as an attendee, somehow my name gets tied up that Wanda Scott supported something. I was just at a meeting. There's a pattern going on. So I just want to clarify. Very important that I clarify this. When you speak, I speak for Gifford Economic Development Council, I'm speaking for 50 people. I'm not speaking for the community, and I don't have the authority to speak for the people unless they put it in writing, which I did bring you. What did I bring you a couple of months ago? In a bunch of pages. Remember what I brought you guys? A petition that was signed by people of the Gifford. They had their names, address, and telephone numbers. I can represent over 300 people that signed that petition. No more. That is, they gave me the authority to speak for them. And that needs to be clarified, because the next time somebody say Gifford, the Gifford residents, I'm a taxpayer. I'm the oldest business in Gifford. The oldest, 53 years old. I'm younger than 53, but the business is 53. So we've been here. The Mosleys, we're an icon. We've been in this community a long time. The children were born here, but our grandparents born in another place. And they came here and they started this business, blood, sweat, and tears to keep this business going. It's just by a wing and a prayer, we're still alive. We're still alive. Not because we got smarts, good looks, but because God allowed. And there's going to come a day when God say, hey, enough. So well, we've done our part. We have served our community. And we will continue to God allow. But I just want that clear, because that is getting to the point where we can easily bring in litigations, because you cannot continue to speak for me while we make decisions based on the Gifford and the people of Gifford based on an organization. When I come before you, I speak for 300 people, and I got the things right there in my bag. Well, it's in the trunk of the car. Can't speak for nobody else.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Scott. We get your point. Thank you. Is anyone else? Mr. Woolfolk.
Yes, Freddie Woolfolk, 4598 57th Avenue. I thank God for, number one, the United States of America.
Amen.
Where we as citizens do have the ability to stand and speak on our own behalf, not necessarily representing an organization. That's why I'm standing to say thank you for the hard work that's went forth in these last few years. I'm so happy to see human beings set up there right now on the dais. I'm so happy because I know in those human beings there's hearts. I'm also a little appalled at the fact that it took this long to get where we are, but if it were not identified that the problem existed on 43rd Avenue and 45th Street a few years back, we wouldn't be here. And it was by a mistake that it really came about. And I'm glad the mistake happened. We happened to find out about it. If we hadn't heard about it, we wouldn't be here tonight talking about an overlay. We wouldn't be talking about rezoning. It would have been business as usual probably as far as what went into that particular area. But because we do have individuals sitting before us today that has hearts, I in no way can imagine in my mind that we replaced ourselves to be like robots, where we'll let our children who attend Dodgertown to go to Dodgertown and do nothing about the problem across the street. That we allow our church to be across the street on the same side and say nothing about the contaminants. We would allow the elderly citizens to be on the corner of 43rd Avenue and 45th Street without doing anything about protecting those individuals there. Without allowing, I can go on about without allowing, even the supervisor election, even the county officials, allowing them to be in that particular proximity close to contamination and do nothing about it. But I believe we don't have robots. We do have human beings who will take a look, as you're doing tonight. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but at least it's a great start. It affords a dialogue. It allows us to express our deep-root emotions about this long-lasting problem, but not just look at it and sit on the table, do a plan and let it gather dust, but instead do what? Try to do the human and the right thing to make sure that our children, our senior citizens, and everybody in River County have a place that we all are proud of. So I take my hat off to Stan and his staff, as well as the commissioners and the Planning and Zoning Commission, how we at least come to the table. There's no need for me to stand on the south side of the road, throw rocks across at you. You stand on the north side and throw them back at me. Only thing, we both walk away with hickeys on our heads. But instead, we say, hey, put your rocks down. I haven't done everything right. You haven't done everything right, but at least we have an opportunity to talk and come to agreement that we can correct some of those things that you have identified. And I think that's what had happened. Have we allowed an opportunity for people in the Gifford community to come forth and express themselves? No, I don't have a list of 300, but we will afford a forum where people can come out and voice their sentiments about things they see in the Gifford area. It may be simple with the red dot syndrome, where we have red dots that show the concerns, but that to me is a voice. It's a voice of people saying, I don't want this particular problem to exist, and here are the priorities of those things to go about. We've done that, we use due diligence, we advertise, and there are people who are not on the list, written as names, who have said, thank you all for at least going when I can't go, speaking when I can't speak, and helping Gifford to maintain its pride and dignity. So I just say, as a final word, continue to have the heart, and I'm sure the commissioners that will come in the future will have hearts to make sure that this is not a short-lived thing, but something that will last forever and ever. So thank you so much, and I support what the staff recommendation coming forth tonight as Freddie Woolfolk.
Okay.
Thank you, Freddie.
Thank you, Mr. Woolfolk. Anyone else wishes to speak? Good evening, welcome. Your name and address, please.
Yes. My name is Leonard Kaczynski. I live at 6036 Ridge Lake Circle, Vero Beach, 32967. Thank you, commissioners and concerned citizens, for your valuable time, for seeking an innovative approach to the urban goods movement and predicting and trying to forecast maintaining property values. I moved here 8 years ago, and there was the missed prediction of property values in the area, and really wasn't too publicized or vocalized about the lack of forecasting an economic business cycle ending. So my question is, it was never answered, what is the forecasted dollar amount of the benefits to the community? I've seen a lot of time, a lot of people's valuable time spent, and I haven't really heard a dollar amount, what the future prediction of what this change is going to bring, as that's what should be working to protect the community and the people that live here. I didn't hear anything about the emergency procedures for this changing fire prevention, if there is going to be a concrete batch processing plant. Critical infrastructure is going to have to be recognized, and I see that there's going to be a lot of good review of it, but I haven't heard anything back to technical experts that we're looking for. The EPA letter's still in the mail. So that was some of my questions, was why we don't have any dollar amount. And the other thing is, I'd just like to read something about the Lloyd's of London. Put my glasses on here real quick. That's the errors and emissions income insurance, and gentleman for the NAACP mentioned that. But the Errors and Emission Commission, they have a code of ethics where they require all changes of health and environmental concerns must be taken before the Lloyd's of London Board of Directors, because they face decades of traumatic environmental and health lawsuits, paying huge punitive damages due to local and state officials passing on environmental and health liabilities until they could recruit more investors under their existing insufficient insurance commissioner. And that's directly from the Lloyd's of London insurance page there. So that's all. I just hope that I use prudence and continue in there. I didn't see one last thing. I seen the map that we hit there, but I didn't see the flood map, the FEMA floodplain in relationship to this. I also noticed the CMEX and tarmac. Where they're located on the floodplain, I didn't see any recognition of that, and I was just curious to why, if something happens, you have a huge reserve, and I wasn't sure if something happened that you'd want to have some federal funds, and if you don't acknowledge the FEMA flood zone and their pattern, that sticking the CMEX and the tarmac right next to a floodplain within a couple hundred meters, I don't believe that's prudent. So I would hope you would use prudence in the future when recognizing the forecasting and predicting the benefits to the community, whether monetary or sociological. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, good evening. Tony Esposito, 4635 45th Street. I'm a salvage owner property, and I want to commend you guys for what you're doing in the county. I don't think the people in this county realize how much money we're spending on these roads and what it's doing for this county. In the past 50 years, they haven't spent what you guys spent in the past couple of years. But I look at it this way. What you spend today, tomorrow is going to cost you twice as much. And I'm glad they got them bridges in on 58th Avenue, because people don't realize until that guy got killed, the kids in the bus there, on, what was it, 41st?
45th, sir.
45th. And 58. But anyway, I want to commend you guys on that. On the same token, our taxes are going to go up pretty high. You know that. At least I can smell it. You don't spend money without getting money from us. But you're doing a very good job spending it. On the same token, I sympathize with us because we are on the short end and we are hurting in business. Everybody is. Just consider us when you tell us, because we don't know exactly what we have to do yet, other than a facelift in the front, which could mean $1,000, it could mean $10,000. But whatever, keep us in mind, and remember one thing. You get more taxes out of us than you do of Royal Gifford. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's close. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Anyone else that wishes to speak? Okay. Seeing no one else, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman?
Gentlemen, Commissioner Fletcher?
I'd like to move staff recommendation, including all four of their recommendations, which is to adopt the proposed ordinance establishing the West Gifford overlay regulations, authorize staff to refund the site plan application and fees and building permit fees paid by any owner who paid such fees for the aesthetic wall or similar structure installed in front of a junkyard along 45th Street. To authorize staff to pay for any site plan, application, and building permit fees for an aesthetic wall or similar structure proposed in the front of a junkyard along 45th Street if the application is submitted on or before December 31st, 2014. And finally, to authorize staff to prioritize over other applications any site plan or building permit application for an aesthetic wall or similar structure to be installed in front of a junkyard along 45th Street. Said prioritization shall apply to aesthetic wall, similar structure applications submitted on or before December 31st, 2014.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Fletcher. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Solari.
Mr. Chairman.
Is there any?
Yeah, excuse me, sorry. Under discussion, the county attorney pointed out something to me in the code. There's one correction I do want to ask you all to provide for. In the text of the ordinance, it's clear demolition debris site special exception use says that several places. In the table, there's one location that we need to put in an S to have that line up correctly in the table. Everything else is correct in the table. So I'd like for the motion to provide for that, if you don't mind.
That was for the special exception on the demolition.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, it had a P, then a 1 footnote.
Yeah, that's
and then-
correct. It needs to be an
I
S.
couldn't find the 1, yeah. Okay.
So amended, sir.
So the motion is amended to change the P1
To an S.
to an S, okay? And the second's good with
Yes,
that?
sir.
All right, thank you, Stan. Any discussion from the commission on the motion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Brings us to the end of the agenda. And with that, gentlemen, we stand. I'd like to thank you all that have come out tonight for your comments. Thank you for participating. Thank you for coming here. And gentlemen, with that, we're adjourned.